What if Noah refused the ark? Would humanity survive? Close your eyes and picture a half-built hull on a windy hillside. Sawdust still in the air. The great ribs of the ark like the bones of a giant whale, reaching for a sky that is already bruising with storm. Animals pause at the tree line, as if they know. And on the slope, a man sets down his hammer. He sighs. He turns away. What happens next? Before we jump into the what if, let's ground ourselves in the story as people know it. The world, as told in Genesis, had tilted toward violence. A flood was announced. A righteous man named Noah received a command: build an ark, a floating home with 3 decks, rooms for animals, and space for supplies. He was given dimensions: wood, pitch. He was given time, years of it. Time that must have felt both urgent and endless. He built while neighbors watched, laughed, or shrugged. He gathered his family. The animals arrived, 2 by 2, sometimes 7 of the clean kinds, symbol upon symbol, feathers and hooves and hope. Then the skies opened. Fountains of the deep burst. Rain came not as a summer shower, but as a cataract, a world-covering wash. The ark rose. For 40 days the waters prevailed. When the vessel finally came to rest on the mountains, Noah sent out a raven, then a dove. The dove returned with an olive leaf, drying land, a future, and after, a covenant, a promise sealed with a bow of light in the clouds. Never again would such a flood destroy all life. That is the familiar ark. Warning, obedience, rescue, renewal, promise. Many cultures carry flood memories, but Noah's Ark is the one that has shaped so much of art, faith, and imagination. Now, our what if. Imagine the moment before the first drop. Imagine the whisper of wind. Noah stands on that hillside and refuses. Not a dramatic rebellion, not a fist raised, just a tired human no. Maybe he's worn down by ridicule. Maybe fear of failure curls inside him. What if I build and nothing happens? Maybe he misreads the timing. Or perhaps in our speculative strand, he trusts the warning but doubts his own role. Surely someone else will take this on. Surely a village can shoulder it better than one family. He puts the hammer down. The clouds gather. The first rain hisses, slow, then steady. In this alternate timeline, word has spread. People have heard Noah's talk of a flood. Even if they mocked, seed thoughts took root. When the first weeks of heavy rain arrive, neighbors start dragging planks to the river. They lash boats together with reeds, rope, anything that floats. Farmers shove grain into clay jars and tie them under rafts for ballast. Children carry chickens under their coats. Sheep balk. Dogs bark. Everyone looks up. Everyone looks out. Noah watches. The delay becomes a choice, and the choice becomes a cascade. If there is no ark, what survives? In our respectful speculation, imagine the flood still comes, but its pattern is different in consequence. Without a single prepared refuge, survival becomes spotty, local, desperate, and inventive. Mountain villages pull together first, because higher ground buys time you can feel in your lungs. Plateau towns knit together rafts into floating neighborhoods, swaying like water lilies. Marsh clans, already at home in reeds and channels, become teachers overnight. They show others how to anchor boats to trees, how to read current, how to share a single fire so the smoke carries a signal through the rain. It's messy. It's sad. Many lives are lost in the first surge. Yet something else happens. A different gift, offered in a different way. People who once ignored each other now tie their boats stern to bow. They ration by lantern light. Quiet prayers rise from every deck, in different words, in the same trembling cadence. What about the animals? Without a dedicated ark, biodiversity changes. Big, heavy creatures have the worst odds. The prize cattle, the desert cats, the slow browsers, many are swept into the dark. Smaller animals, naturally curious and quick, cling to floating timber. Birds crowd into caves and under cliff overhangs. Domesticated species get strange protection because people grab what they know. Goats, chickens, dogs, stubborn donkeys that hate water but love their people enough to keep climbing. This reshapes the future. Imagine a world where goats become even more central to survival stories, where the myth animal of salvation isn't a dove with an olive branch, but the rough-haired goat that led people up a switchback to a dry ledge in the night. Picture later children painting their walls with a different hero animal, the little horns crowned in a string of wildflowers. And the symbols. Oh, the symbols change. Without a vast ark cresting the waves, there's no single floating cathedral to capture the imagination. Instead, in villages that make it through, survivors pile up stones on ridges, a long line of cairns, like exclamation points across the peaks. Every year, when the rains return, they climb and touch those stones. They tell the story of helping hands. They teach children how to watch the river's color. They sing a song that sounds like water under a drum. Technology accelerates along wet pathways. The flood forces ingenuity fast. If the lowest plains are scoured, then the centers of early life shift upslope. The first great cities do not rise on the gentle silt of wide rivers. They cling to terraces in the highlands. Think of steppe towns stitched across the Zagros and Anatolian ridges, Ethiopian plateaus with scalloped fields, hilltop granaries like beehives. People learn the art of cisterns early, channels cut into living rock, runoff captured and shared. Ancestral engineers stamp out the blueprint for reservoirs and sluices generations sooner, because hazard makes teachers of them all. And ships become the lore of every child. Not a single ark memorized in one story, but 1,000 designs. Reed boats like crescent moons, flat rafts with stone anchors, covered barges with windows under the eaves. Shipwright guilds emerge not as a curiosity by the sea, but as a calling in the mountains. Imagine lighthouses born early, tall bonfires stoked on ridges during rainy seasons, the flame wrapped in stone towers with slatted vents, guiding families like stars brought down to earth. Faith changes tone, but not its heartbeat. Instead of one family held aloft, communities begin to tell of a God who warned and a people who learned together. A prophet who hesitated, Noah, becomes a different kind of lesson. Not the model of perfect immediacy, but the mirror of our own delay. In our alternate, respectful story, sermons in future centuries might sound like this. There was a man who heard. He paused. He was afraid. Yet the warning, once scattered, grew into common wisdom. And the mercy of heaven did not vanish because one person faltered. It found 1,000 small doors. The covenant? Without an ark to walk out of, the bow in the clouds takes on another meaning. Not a single family's welcome sign, but a shared reminder that storms have an end. People mark that bow by lifting their eyes together, by touching those ridge-lined stones, by holding up polished copper mirrors so a shard of rainbow seems to rest in their hands. The sign is the same. The ceremony becomes communal. Languages. Memory ripples through words. In our world, later languages carry a dove with an olive branch as peace. Here, peace becomes shared shelter. The idiom for trust is tying ropes. Agreements are called knots. To reconcile is to untangle. A promise is a bridge. Proverbs sprout from the flood. He who watches the river color saves his neighbor. Better a tied rope than a brave speech. Leave a bread loaf under the eaves for the rain day you'll never see. You can feel how these shifts bend the map. If lowland floodplains take longer to recover, the first scripts and laws may be scratched on slate high above the deltas. When the waters fall and plains invite again, highland cultures carry a kind of weather wisdom into the valleys. Mesopotamia still rises, but with memory. Canals are sacred. Levees are loved. Egypt, already master of measured flood, becomes a teacher empire, not because it conquers, but because it shares calendars, gauges, and the gospel of the Nilometer. Priests in white linens raise wands not to summon water, but to measure it, an act half ritual, half science. Some myths we know never bloom, and others rise instead. Without a single ark, the world lullaby changes. Parents still hum about hope after storms, but the gentle bird with the branch doesn't perch on every nursery wall. In its place, a lantern glows, a little clay lamp painted with a carved rainbow. Light in a window becomes the universal sign of safe harbor. Cities adopt a law. When rains fall hard, every window shows a light, so the lost find their way. Midway through, let's press pause. In this alternate world, Do you think communities would have organized to build a many arcs fleet, or would survival stay local and improvised? I'd love to hear your take in the comments. And if careful, respectful what-ifs like this help you see familiar stories in new light, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Alright, back to our timeline. What becomes of Noah himself? In this imagining, he is not erased. He's remembered as the man who named the danger out loud before anyone else. The one whose delay taught others how to act without waiting for one perfect leader. Later storytellers soften and round him, not to shame, but to humanize. In murals, his eyes are thoughtful. In plays, he is the character who says, "We must be ready together." He walks the ridges placing stones with the rest. And when children ask, he laughs softly and says, "The warning is a gift. Don't make my mistake. Move when you can, share when you should." Genealogies shift a little too. Not in their desire to connect, but in their shape. Where our tradition lists nations from the sons of one survivor, here clans trace their lines to several mountain refuges. The Table of Nations is not a single branch, but a braid. A line from the Zagros, a line from Ararat's neighbors, a line from a Sinai outpost that learned to trap water in cisterns and teach travelers how to find them. This creates a subtle cultural humility. No one clan claims, "We alone stood in that ark." Instead, people say, "We stood because we stood together." Rituals grow around readiness. Every year before the rains, towns hold a simple day called Rope Day. Children learn knots. Elders inspect cisterns. The poor receive sealed jars of grain and oil to keep under their eaves. This isn't fear. It's a quiet joy that says, "The world is wild, and we are neighbors." The day ends with lights and windows, and songs that sound like rivers talking to stones. Art leans into water's duality, danger and blessing. Potters paint spirals around pitchers to remind them that the same water that floods is the water that feeds the fields. Carvers chisel rain lines into door lintels, and above every doorway a tiny rainbow curve gleams in paint. In stories told by firelight, the villain is rarely the storm itself. It's the stubborn pride that refuses to share a rope. What about the faith that blooms centuries later? The faith of wandering shepherds, psalmists, prophets. It still comes. Abraham still leaves home in this telling, called by a voice that lights the horizon. Moses still learns in the desert, a man schooled by wind. David still sings. Isaiah still dreams of swords beaten into plowshares. But threaded through those songs and laws is an earlier lesson. Heed warnings, cherish neighbors, put lights in your windows when skies darken. In this world, the prophet's cry often stacks two imperatives. Turn your heart and tie your ropes. Compassion and preparedness, twinned. A king praised in this timeline is not merely brave in battle, but wise in wartime. The one who sets aside storehouses and trains boat builders. When the psalmist thanks the Almighty, he mentions not the ark alone, but the hands that built 100 little boats and the eyes that watched for color in the flood. Because the ark is not there, other sanctuaries rise. Mountain shrines overlooking old high water marks become holy places. Temples keep tools alongside tablets. The sacred chest that holds the law might sit beside a coil of rope. Candles are not only symbols of light, they are literal guides, lined up along the path during long rains. Centuries later, when storytellers gather to write, their scrolls carry a subtle difference in how they frame heroism. A hero still listens to God, but also knows when to rouse the village. The great sin isn't only violence, it's the cold, refined indifference that leaves the weak in low places when the sky turns iron. And the great virtue is not only purity, it is shared strength. It is the hand extended before thunder speaks. On the edges of this timeline, something else glows. Science and devotion share a bench, not as opponents, but as cousins. Priests chart rain cycles because it's a holy task. Scribes annotate flood stories with measurements of last year's crest. Kids grow up happy to ask, why? Because questions are part of hearing the warning well. Does the rainbow still shine? Yes. Across both worlds, ours and the imagined, it bends the same. Refraction doesn't change, but the way we greet it shifts. We don't step out of a single door into clean air. We lean out of many windows, lanterns still warm at our elbows. We smile at each other across the valley. The bow becomes a bridge for the eyes, connecting house to house, mountain to mountain. And what of loss? Any flood story carries grief. In a no-arc world, we admit the sadness plainly. We tell children the truth. We lost things. We lost animals we loved. We lost the shape of some river towns and the walls of some hidden fields. But then we point to what grew. Mercy braided into custom. Knowledge carried in songs. 1,000 small covenants made neighbor by neighbor. We say, look how the world learned to be ready and kind. At last, we step back. This is speculation, not doctrine. A respectful tilt of the head toward a story that shaped the world. We didn't come to replace it. We came to ask how one choice, one tired no, one delayed yes, can ripple through faith, culture, and history. In the story we know, Noah says yes and rides out a sea of unmaking. In the story we imagined, his hesitation seeds a people who build many boats and many bonds. Which world would you want to grow up in? It's a trick question, because both teach us something true. Obedience saves. So does community. Warnings matter. So does courage that spreads, hand to hand. As the rain moves off and the bow lifts from the clouds in our mind's sky, here's a gentle thought to carry into your evening. Most of us will never be asked to build an ark, but all of us will face small floods of worry, of busyness, of change. When they come, may we remember to listen well, to move when we can, and to leave a light in the window for the neighbor walking up the hill. This was a story of wonder, not a map for belief, a way to see how narratives shape us, and how our choices might shape each other. Until next time, keep your ropes tied, your eyes on the color of the river, and your heart open to the bow that breaks through any storm.